Work connection. Hey everybody, happy Friday. I'm so glad it's Friday. Friday, May 18th, TGIF. Welcome to the TED Show, and I'm with my friend Eric Gray from United Against Poverty Orlando, or UP. Let us know you can hear us or see us. I think you can see us probably, but we're making sure you can hear us because I don't have my laptop up today. I didn't plan very well. Ron Wilkerson, let us know you can give us a thumbs up. And let us know you can hear us or see us because it's so important. I don't know if the reason I ask that all the time, Eric, is because I did a show, an entire show.
I didn't see that one, but I heard.
Oh yeah, well nobody saw it unfortunately or heard it because we got through the whole show, and my guest at the time was Justin Clark he's got a law firm in town and a radio show, and we did it right before the hurricane, and it was a great show about homeowner insurance, home insurance, and nothing. Nobody couldn't even get audio out of it. All you could see was my big lips yapping, and you couldn't hear anything. So, hey Veronica, hey Wayne, let us know you can hear us or see us. Okay, good. He can hear us or see us. Hey Ron. All right, so welcome. We've been trying to get together. It's been my schedule, not yours, and have you on the show probably since the beginning because I'm such a proponent of United Against Poverty. I toured it ages and ages ago when Andre was there, and of course Scott George, and then you came into the picture and have done amazing things with it. So we want to get into that and talk about that. But welcome, my friend. It's good to see you.
Appreciate having me.
Absolutely. All right. So give us a little history on you. Tell us about Eric Gray. I see you're a University of Kentucky graduate, a UF graduate. Go Gators.
Yeah.
But give us a little history so people can get to know you.
Sure. Yeah. I born in Jacksonville, raised in Tallahassee, went to junior high and high school in Tampa, and then college in Gainesville. So I've been all over Florida, and my family's been here for many generations. So I'm a Florida guy, and went to grad school in Kentucky, but then came back home. And my wife and I wanted to pick a city where we could kind of set up our own thing. And Orlando is the only major city in the state where we didn't have family, so we actually picked Orlando to move to. In 2003. So we've been here for 15 years, and it's just been an amazing experience. My very first job here was working at the History Center downtown with Sarah Van Arsdale, and that was the best job a new person could ever have because I got to really understand the community in a way that most people don't have that opportunity.
What did you do there?
I was their development director. I helped raise money for the museum, which is just a few blocks from here.
I think most people probably haven't even visited that museum.
No,
you've got to get somebody on here.
It's definitely a must-see. Mike Perkins is the new director, and he's amazing. He's a neighbor of mine, and was there when I was working there. Sarah Van Arsdale, who was the former executive director, was there for over 20 years, and they used to be in a tiny little space over what we now call the Orlando Shakespeare Center.
Oh yes.
But then they moved into the old Orange County Courthouse that was built in 1927, and it was renovated beautifully. It's one of the nicest museums in the country, and it's just amazing. The renovation and the exhibits. If you don't really know about your community and you want to learn about Orlando and you want to do it in 2 hours or less, you go to the History Center. It's the best place to do that.
You're getting called out a little bit in a funny way. Sharon Cetera, I have to do this.
Yeah, sure.
Did he just say he chose to move to Orlando because he didn't have family here?
In part, yeah, because we wanted to kind of make our own way.
I love that.
We wanted to, we have family in Tampa and Tallahassee and Apalachicola and Naples, Fort Myers. And this was one of the things we thought, you know what, we're going to make our own, make a name for ourselves in our own community, and that was one of the
Did you come here before did you come and have your children here, or did you bring your children with you?
Well, we had our first daughter in Kentucky, and then 6 weeks later we moved here, and we started actively looking when we learned that we were expecting a baby, and decided, we wanted to do that back home, and close enough to family that we could do it with some help. And Orlando just, it really spoke to us as a good, positive family community. We've learned a lot about Orlando since, and a lot about not only the history, but also the present and the future of the community. And not everything here is as rosy as we would like for it to be.
It's not.
But
I love it here, but there's so many positives, right?
It's just, the school system has actually been great. The high school system that we're in, Timber Creek out in East Orange County, has been amazing, and my wife had started a small business here almost as soon as we moved here. She's an occupational therapist. She's done amazing things with her small business, and So we've had a great time. We've had a wonderful experience. It's
That's
just been
awesome.
the best
How
choice
much?
we ever made.
How has it changed? Hey Tammy, happy Friday. How has it changed since you got here?
Well, I think we're growing as a community in a lot of ways. I think the community has done a lot more in regional planning. So one of my heroes here in the community is Jacob Stewart, and he, for years even before I moved here, was kind of the leading champion for regional planning. You know, the idea that the 85 municipalities that are within the 13 county region that is Central Florida, you know, we're not connecting with one another. And he really, I think, did
It's a visionary.
job.
Definitely, the Stewarts in general. I just feel like they've had the heart of the city.
Yeah. And Robert Stewart's one of my heroes too, because he's both holding an elected position at the city and also running a nonprofit in a significant way here in this community. So, yeah, the Stewart family is amazing, and I've gotten to know most of them now, and there's a lot of families like that here in Orlando that have just done amazing things and throughout multiple generations. You know, the Jernigan family, which was not only instrumental in starting the city, but also Florida Hospital, and the entire Orange Memorial program that we can see from here.
I think a lot of people don't know that Jernigan's name, except that they know it's over at the Amway Center.
Yeah.
Is the name of the restaurant. I don't think anybody's ever put two and two together.
You know, Jernigan's one of the founding families of the community, going back to the mid-19th century, 1850s time period, pre-Civil War. And the family was large, and there were a lot of descendants of the family. They're still, you know, all throughout this community. But one of the original directors or CEOs, and I'm not sure what the title was at the time, for what became Florida Hospital was a Jernigan. And there's a lot of history there that I don't even know. But there's a lot of great families like that, and the Saros family, which helped, you know, start the Tangerine Bowl, and which has now become the Citrus Bowl, which has now become Camping World Stadium.
Which is, I actually, at the Mayor's Academy 2 weeks ago, we went and we did venues. I didn't even know there was an entire venues department. That's why the Mayor's Academy has been so great, because like you with the History Center, I'm learning so much stuff that I just didn't know about the city, and I thought I knew a lot. But the Tinker Field, they did a whole, you know, there was this whole controversy there, but that whole area, they've preserved stuff. There's actually a whole Tinker Field setup, like a memorial sort of to all of the things that go on here. Camping World Stadium was fascinating. I went in, I don't think I had been there in so long, and I certainly hadn't been there with the renovations, but that's what our city does. I mean, I feel like Mayor Dyer and his whole team have been just awesome.
There's a lot of history in the city. I mean, Orlando is the youngest major city east of the Mississippi, you know, not really having been founded until post-statehood, after 1845. Part of that's because there's no waterway here that was a natural port that set up the city originally.
Didn't realize
but,
that. Right.
It's been a tourism community long before 1971 when Walt Disney opened parks here. There were a lot of we call tin can tourists, people who had kind of created the original motorhomes by building boxes on the back of their Model Ts and actually driving them south for the winter. And Walt Disney originally picked not the Orlando community to build his second park, but it was originally supposed to be in Missouri, in the St. Louis area.
It was?
And that didn't work out. And he knew this area because his parents lived in Eustis, and so he was familiar with that community. And when they were looking for a second site in 1963, he saw the construction of the Florida Turnpike and the newly constructed Interstate 4, and what was being constructed as a real potential for travel to be able to come to his park. So that's why he started buying land.
I did not know that. I didn't know his parents lived in Eustis.
Yeah, I don't think they were originally from there. I think it might have been a retirement community for them, like it is for, you know, thousands and thousands of other people. But this has been a community that's really tried to find a name for itself in its own industry for a long time. We started with cattle, and then citrus, and you know, now tourism and
tourism's
real
the number
estate.
one, right?
Yeah, tourism is our big industry, of course, with the number one tourism market on the planet now. But you know, being in the most popular city in the known universe has its advantages, and it has some disadvantages.
It's true.
Yeah.
So let's talk. Why did you get into what was philanthropy or nonprofits? Was that your degree? Were those your degrees?
My undergraduate degree was actually in television and radio operations. I thought I was planning on trying to run a television station. That's what I wanted to do. not to be on camera, but to help manage that.
Like the production part, the
Yeah,
management.
yeah. And I worked in my first 2 jobs in commercial television, then I worked in public television, and that's how I got into the nonprofit sector and really fell in love with it, and had an opportunity while I was at the University of Kentucky working at the public television network there to go to grad school there and get a degree in public administration and nonprofit management, and that has really steered my career since really 1997.
So where were you, well, I want to get to UP obviously, but where were you right before UP? You had worked in the nonprofit field, obviously.
Yeah, so I had worked at the Kentucky Educational Television Network for a number of years, doing a lot of their pledge drives, raising money on air, like we do everywhere with PBS nationally, right. And then briefly for a hospital network, a hospital system, a Catholic hospital system there. And I would have stayed there. We really loved Kentucky, except we decided to start a family, and it was a tough decision to move. But it was not that tough in the sense that we have no family anywhere else other than Florida.
Right.
So we wanted to.
You had to come back,
yeah.
Especially if you want the support and the help.
Yes,
all right, so let's. I tell my daughter, like she lives in Texas, like you've got to come home. You don't know what it's like to try to have a baby and not have family around. Oh, Shirley Stamper, go UK.
I know Shirley, yep.
She's awesome. Hey Shirley, we love you. All right, so talk about UP. Let's talk about United Against Poverty,
sure.
And because I really want to dive into the services, because I think if you look at your website, the services that you provide it's unique in town because you're not a homeless respite.
Right.
I love the hand up, not a handout, right? That's been something that you guys have said for a long time. So talk about the concept behind United Against Poverty.
Yeah, I mean, we can almost see it from where we're sitting.
I know.
We're looking due south. It started off as the ministry of a non-denominational Christian church called Destiny that Pastor Scott George and his wife Tammy had started, and they had this concept to try and do something a little bit different outside the normal emergency food pantry model to help people, particularly in the downtown area, that might be struggling with employment or just low wages in general, or with any number of circumstances. And he had gotten an idea from another organization in Sanford that still exists called Harvest Time International, and Dr. John Murphy, who's doing an amazing work there in Sanford. And that organization also kind of spun off in its own way the idea for another pastor down in Vero Beach named Austin Hunt and his wife Ginny. They actually started only a year or two later after Scott and Tammy started another similar program down in Vero Beach. And ultimately, the two organizations merged together.
Oh, I did not know that.
And we have been doing the program here in Orlando since 2001. We started September 1st, 2001. And
because the pantry setup alone is unique.
Yeah.
So explain to them, because if you haven't been, and we'll give all the contact information later, explain to them the pantry and how that works, because it's different. And then I want to talk about the fact that we have we have these group of people. It's really kind of a large group of people that are just a step away from possibly being homeless, not having the services, not being able to access health care, not being able to find a job. It's very scary out there, and so I think that they're a group that people don't think about. You see somebody on the street, you have a whole bunch of people behind that who's struggling so that they don't go on the street.
Yeah.
So talk about the pantry.
So we call it the Member Share Grocery Program, and it's again, it's not my idea, but I'm lucky enough to be the steward of that program that's been around for a long time now. And the concept is more of a social enterprise, in the way we use terminology now, even as opposed to just a charitable organization, because it's a business. It's a not-for-profit business, but it's a business. So we have groceries available for anybody that meets our qualifications. Those qualifications are really simple. If you live in a household whose income is at a certain level or below, then you qualify. Those roughly around, if it's a household, a family of 4, earning about $45,000 a year or less, then you would qualify to use the program. So in this community, that works out to be roughly 330,000 households, or over 40% of the community. So
did y'all hear those numbers?
So it's not a minor part of the community. It's a major segment of the community. And Orlando has among the highest percentages of what that's sometimes referred to as the working poor. And I don't particularly like that term, but that's the term that's used. So we have a lot of people in this community who they don't necessarily need emergency assistance. It's not really a hunger issue. It's an issue of, they're very constrained budgets. It's very expensive to live in any community. Orlando is certainly not an inexpensive community to live in.
Right.
So we were trying to find a way as an organization to help people stretch their budget. So the food is highly discounted. So we offer groceries with a roughly 60 or 70% discount. So something like a tube of toothpaste that might cost $1 at a regular grocery would be about 35 cents at our.
Are all of those groceries donated?
So right now, when we first started, we actually purchased all of the food off of what's called the secondary market. Over the years, we've built up more and more relationships with grocers and manufacturers and distributors all over the country, and now we have donated product from 14 different states. I think we have 62 different donors. So roughly about 75–80% of our groceries is donated now, which has allowed us to reduce the overall expense to the members, or just really raise the discounts overall.
And so somebody qualifies, they go in, and I've been there. So it's like a grocery store, right? So you go in, and you've got shopping carts. And so tell them how that works.
Yeah, it's an old warehouse. It was built here in the late 1930s, so it's not as nice as a Publix or a Winn-Dixie or Walmart. But we do our best, and it is set up with regular shelves and coolers and freezers and cash registers. And the only stipulation, it's kind of like going to a Costco or a BJ's or a Sam's Club. You have to be a member, and membership requires that you complete some documentation, and so our members are verified based on their income. So one of the major differences between what we do and, say, an emergency food pantry is that we know that the people using the program need the services. That's not to say that people who use emergency food pantries don't need it, but they don't have a verification process. And they can't, because they're usually much smaller at churches, community centers that do that. So we operate on a much larger scale, where we have roughly 500 families a day that come to the institution. And we have right now just over 28,000 grocery members, and an additional 6,000 people that are part of our life enrichment, crisis intervention programs. So over the years, in addition to the grocery, we've been able to add on different services to help people, such as a medical clinic, which is actually run by an entirely different nonprofit that are on our site, called the Healthcare Center for the Homeless. They're also known as the Orange Blossom Family Health. And so we have partnerships with multiple different nonprofits. Right now it's 28, and most of them are there at least once a month. Some are there once a week, and there's a couple that are there every day.
So it's more than just, so talk about that, because it's more than just the pantry.
Yeah.
So, but the pantry provides, you have 28,000 registered members, 500 families a day. So think about that, guys. I mean, it's to me, that is epidemic, right? I mean, it feels like that, because of the wage issues, because of the way the economy is, it feels like that's a growing population.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think, they talk about the magnitude and number of people. I mean, we're not as busy as a typical commercial grocery store would be, but we're busier than a typical emergency room might be, and we're definitely busier than any other social service agency in the state. So we use that traffic that comes into our campus every day to our advantage, because there are a lot of other things that people could use some assistance with.
Correct.
And so we try to make available other things that people could use assistance, computer labs, assistants trying to apply for jobs, writing resumes.
Because you have and we've got a couple questions. You have a resume service. You guys really help. And let me get, Diane asked, how do you balance all the negativity we see every day in the news with news like this? That for me or for Eric? I'll let you answer that, Diane. And then Ron Wilkerson just asked, the name of it is United Against Poverty Orlando, but it's also affectionately known as UP. Yeah. And it's on Michigan and Orange, correct? Yeah, we're just west of Orange Avenue on Michigan Street, right on the railroad tracks. And we are working in an effort to try and reduce the poverty rate in the community. Our effort overall is, our purpose, a stated purpose, is to inspire and empower families to lift
themselves from a place of poverty to self-sufficiency. And we define self-sufficiency as people who are in households earning over 200% of U.S. poverty. And the reason for that is that's the level in which you would no longer qualify for any type of public assistance if you're above that level. So there's nothing magical about it. That's just a definition that we've applied to it. And so our goal isn't just to assist people in the grocery, it's to actually end poverty for one family at a time. So far this year, even though we've had tens of thousands of people come through the grocery already this year, the most important thing we've done is we've helped 12 families this year lift completely out of poverty. 5 of those we've gotten above 200% of U.S. poverty because we're helping them get into living wage jobs, and we're doing that with a program we call STEP, and it's a 6-week-long class that people go through and learn a lot about themselves, and they learn a lot about the best ways to acquire jobs, the best ways to keep a job, conflict resolution, a lot of things that people might struggle with, especially if they had a high barrier to employment. And one of the things that we struggle with, that's also a struggle for a lot of people everywhere, are those barriers. Something like a mental health issue,
right?
Diagnosed or undiagnosed, something like a criminal background, where you might be not able to apply for certain jobs, and those things should not restrict people from working. We just have to find the right opportunities for them.
Well, and so when somebody goes there and they just come and they either have lost a job or you called it living wage. Do you obviously help them with resumes, but I also remember you guys help teach them about how to interview. So give them some more ideas, because this is what happens. You lose a job, or you're in a job where it's lower wage, living wage. And you want to get to the level where you can actually afford rent and you can afford the things. And what happens is if you lose your job, most people are paycheck to paycheck. And they're, it's just one bad paycheck away, or losing a job, or one emergency, and you could be out on the streets. So what if they lose a job? They can come to you, and you guys can take a look at what their resumes are. Do you work with local industries to help them find jobs?
All of that. We certainly are not on our own. We work with dozens of partner agencies, as well as the city and the county and the state of Florida. We're not a government agency, but we try to partner with anybody and everybody who's working in this field, whether it's trying to get someone who is homeless into an appropriate shelter, or trying to get someone who was in a domestic abuse situation for many, many years and maybe wasn't working and now needs to get back in the workforce because they've successfully escaped that situation, but they need to work. So we're trying to address needs one at a time. We're building systems around it because some of these stories have common threads. So when we learn about how to help one person who's been in a violent situation, that helps us to learn how to replicate that for someone else. But everybody's unique, and I think the most effective thing we do is not even our own programs, it's that connection to all the other available services in the community, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Because what if you don't have a computer? Sam, thanks for that. He says, love that you're promoting this. Anyone who's lived in poverty will understand how important being, and I can't read the rest of it, Sam, but thank you. I think people don't realize, what if you don't have a computer?
Right.
So if you don't have a computer, how are you going to figure out where all of the services are? Because most of us take for granted we can Google the services. But if you're living in a situation where you're very close to, or not, you're impoverished or poverty-stricken, and you don't have a laptop, you can't get to all the services. So you guys are a conduit. You work as a conduit as well. People can come to you and you can educate people on.
Yeah, and I think computer usage is definitely a critical area. Even just computer literacy. There are a lot of people who come to us that just the idea of a mouse is really foreign to them, and we just sitting with people to walk them through the initial steps. You mentioned one of our slogans is we like to offer a hand up as opposed to a handout. I think one of the most illustrative ways that we do that is by helping people with a computer. We offer a hand up by being hands off. We'll talk them through it so they can get to be comfortable on their own. The analogy is often used as teaching a man to fish as opposed to giving him a fish.
Right.
I think that we're trying to offer compassion that is very constructive, and we mostly are doing that by engaging not only other agencies, but a lot of other volunteers. We have thousands of volunteers that work with this group. The volunteer program itself is is it's like its own organization.
I love
people.
that.
So we really are blessed to have a lot of volunteer support.
So what do you think? What is your biggest need? Thanks, Joe. He says, "Great episode." That's all you, Eric. What is the biggest need that you all have when you are? Because obviously, all charitable organizations, it seems like there's never enough.
Yeah.
No matter how amazing you are, there's because there's such a need. It's not that you don't want to provide the service, but there's an overwhelming need, especially what you're talking about. What are some of the things that people can do to get involved? What are some of your needs that maybe people who are watching the show or will watch later can say, well, I can do that, or I could donate that, or I could come volunteer? What are some of your bigger needs?
Well, the big need is always this idea of community engagement or volunteerism, however you want to put it. I think that most people want to volunteer, they want to get involved, but the opportunities don't always mesh with their life. You know, people are working, they're busy,
right.
They have children, they have responsibilities. And usually where because I get asked that question a lot, like where can I start, what do we need? We certainly need food, we certainly need donations financially, but the biggest need here for us and for every other organization in town, in my opinion, is volunteerism. And it starts with talking about what you think is needed in the community. So, you know, for example, just learning through the show today that 42% of the community earns under 200% of U.S. poverty, so 42% of the community is considered working poor.
Wow.
That's a fact. That's not something I made up. That's a U.S. Census fact from 2017 data. And I think you can start by sharing that with somebody else. You know, just
right.
the idea, now you're volunteering in maybe 10 seconds of your time, but you've now volunteered as part of a larger community discussion.
Right.
And then from there, if you really want to get your hands dirty on something, I think the idea here is you do one thing a year. And that's, if you know, if everybody that did one thing a year, we'd have a massive turnout of volunteers and it would change the world. And I think most people perceive that they volunteer, but they may not really actively volunteer, because I think real successful volunteerism is repeated. So the idea that you're doing it once a year and then you do it again the next year and again the next year, that allows organizations to build on that.
Great.
So I'd rather have one person come out an hour a year for 10 consecutive years than one time for 10 hours. Because I can build off of that and I can
Right.
recruit more people.
That's actually, I've never heard that before. That's good. Monica, you're right. That's a great idea.
That's just that's always the greatest need. And I think people have to find where we need it. In our organization, it doesn't necessarily just need people to volunteer for us. We need people to engage in whatever part of the community is meaningful to them. Because
Sure.
if you're enjoying it, you're going to do it again. And if you're not enjoying it, you won't. So if it's Canine Companions for Independence or Salvation Army or the Orlando Art Museum, you know, there's some really phenomenal
We really
organizations
do.
in this
We have
community.
amazing. I mean, I think our community we band together. I feel like super well, even since I've been here. I mean, the last even 5 years, it seems like we've really, really come together as a community.
Last 2 years, I mean, since Pulse,
I think.
the hurricanes, I mean, yeah.
We embrace, like, I feel like we're a very loving, giving city. I talk about this on the show all the time. We really do want to help each other.
Yeah.
It's definitely different than when I grew up. I mean, we have really progressed, I feel like.
I agree. I think that the idea of the Orlando United campaign, which is now kind of spilled over into multiple areas, and unfortunately it took a terrible, terrible crisis to bring people together, but that's usually what does bring people together. And so I think it was wise of the leaders in the community not to kind of shrink from that, but to really step in and say, we're going to attack this, we're going to use this to get people engaged. And there's some really amazing, I mean, the Orlando United program that's going on right here in this community now is phenomenal. I mean, they'll be writing books about that for years.
Sam, I loved your story. Sam just shared that he was in Spain 15 years ago, broke, and somebody took the time. I can't read the rest of it, but I'm going to say somebody took the time to reach out or to help you. And I think that's what people miss. There's actually daily opportunities. Every single day, I'm presented with an opportunity where just a word of encouragement or I'll help you here can mean the difference to people, because we don't know what everybody's going through. You know, social media is powerful, but it's also a very big veil that people can hide behind, and you only see the pretty stuff, and a lot of people assume that it's only pretty stuff, and it's not. I know a lot of people who tune into the show that reach out to me afterwards like, Ted, that's exactly what I was going through, or I'm suffering and here's what's up. And that's the positive power of social media, that we're able to reach those people.
Speaking the truth is very powerful. I think speaking the truth requires authenticity and oftentimes vulnerability that people aren't always willing to share. You've done a great job of that with your show. You've been very open to talk about not only the great things going on in your life, but some of the things that aren't so hot. Absolutely. And you've had a lot of guests that have done the same. And I think the more people talk about their weaknesses, really in conjunction with their strengths, their vulnerabilities, the things that they don't do well. I have problems in my life. You know, my family, we struggle with some mental health issues, and you've done a great job of talking about some of that on your show. We've had issues in my family with alcoholism, and I think that the more people are willing to stand up, raise their hand, and say, you know, I have a problem, that the better the community is. My position about Orlando in particular is that as the most popular place on the planet, you know, we literally the most popular city in the known universe, we have a really unique opportunity when it comes to things like homelessness and poverty to stand up on stage, in the world stage in this case, raise our hand and say, we have a problem.
Right.
We're okay with you knowing about it. We're not trying to cover it as the happiest place on earth. We want you to know about it because we want you to watch us fix it and learn from it or help us along the way.
Yes.
We do we're really particular about making sure everything is nice and neat and clean and Disney-esque, and Disney's best of that in the world. But I think sometimes people really, all the time, I think they appreciate authenticity. And I think if we can be vulnerable as a city, and we were vulnerable, you know, June 12th, 2 years ago.
We were.
It was vulnerable as a city can get. I think that one instance showed how strong the community is.
Agreed.
And I think that's an opportunity that we have to try and take advantage of, not just with tragedy, but even just on a daily basis, is find those times to show our vulnerability.
I agree. You've got lots of love. Hey, Barry.
Hi, Barry.
I love Barry. We went to college together.
I know very well.
Yeah, good guy, great guy. Yeah, I think the vulnerability is so key to all of it. So if we are on social media and just preaching instead of listening and opening up, the more people see, that's why on the show the hashtag is always what's your story, because the more people can learn about you, then they have that real connection. Because a lot of times people are sitting there watching a show, looking at social media, looking at the news, thinking I'm the only one going through this. So when you're willing to share that you went through it, you have a friend that went through it, or opening yourself up, yes, there are going to be people that are going to take advantage of that. I get it, but I'm telling you that the good outweighs the bad on the vulnerability. Some of the stuff that I've shared, some of the stuff, like you said, people share on the show. It's the first time they've shared that. And that's what we have a lot of emotional shows, because that's the first time somebody's actually come out and told it, spoken the words about what they're going through, and that gets a rush of people wanting to wrap their arms around them or going, oh my God, I'm not the only one. And so if we can do that as a community, which is what we're all trying to do, I feel like, and lots of love on here, so you have to go back and look.
Yeah, and one of the things I really respect in my generation, I think that it'll go down in history as a big part of my Generation X, is the people who in the 40s, 50s, 60s, particularly in the 80s, 90s, and the beginning of the 21st century, who came out and said, you know, I'm a homosexual, I'm bisexual, I'm transgender. That allowed people to approach a whole level of honesty within themselves. I think there's almost nobody more heroic than the people who were first willing to do that. Because how hard is it to live your life with trying to cover things, trying to hide things? And I think that that's kind of evidence what we're talking about, that the pioneers who allowed themselves to be vulnerable really have opened the gates for a lot of other things. But it's not just with the LGBT community. We're talking about with anything, you know, with mental health, with people who have been incarcerated and are now struggling because they can't get jobs, can't get apartments. You know, talking about that, being willing to say, I was in prison.
Right. And
those people, I think, are going to be among the next pioneers, because we incarcerate a larger percentage of our population than any country at any time in the history of the world. So we have an entire generation of people that I think are themselves going to have to be pioneers to talk about, yes, I committed a crime, I served my time, I'm one of the 34% of Americans who've been arrested, you know, but that's a huge portion of the population. Those are the pioneers when you talk about your vulnerability. That's one of the things I'm so proud of with our organization, is that, you know, people who come to us, we always ask them, you know, why do you use the program? And so they say, well, because of the very, very low prices. And we don't call them prices, we call them handling fees, and it's all a nonprofit program, but we know how they look at it. But the number two reason is always because we want to support the program.
I love that.
And so, it's this like an ongoing cycle, and that they're willing to come out and be seen at a program that, is known as United Against Poverty.
Right.
And that's just part of the kind of wonder of people really pitching in that way.
All right, so we're going to share all of Eric's contact information. Obviously, I tagged him in United Against Poverty in the beginning, but I'll do it again when we share the video. And you got a lot of amazing comments on there, and Eric and I will both go back through and respond. But we appreciate it. We appreciate the love. Sam, I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story too. Again, because you broke free because somebody gave you the hand up. Right? So that's amazing. So any parting words of wisdom for them, anything you want to share with them, any upcoming events, anything you want them to know?
I just appreciate people taking the time to engage in the community by even things like watching your show. Every little bit counts. Our organization is out there for anybody to use, anybody can volunteer. We're accessible at huge levels. I think one of the most exciting things we're doing right now is we have a family volunteer night on the second Friday of every month, and people can come out without being oriented or trained. They just walk in, and we'll put them to work between 5 and 8 on the second Friday of every month. And it's intended to help young people kind of start a process of community service.
I love that.
But just this year, we received a grant. We were able to bring in some professional therapists, other paraprofessionals that are now making it so that adults and children with disabilities can volunteer at the same time. So
cool.
Whether it's a child on the autism spectrum, or an adolescent with Down syndrome, or an adult with cerebral palsy, we're getting people engaged, and it's not fake work. This is real volunteers that we really need help with. And I think that's kind of fun. It's been a fun program this year.
That's so creative, and that's what's great. And you're providing such a huge array of services. So check them out. Again, I'm going to tag the Facebook page, which will lead you to the website, but you can Google it too. But I'm going to give all of Eric's contact information at the end. Thanks, man, for coming on. I appreciate you so much. Appreciate what you're doing. Look, we have great people in our city. Look at what they're doing, and so many people have not heard
Ted's
about
one of our oldest, not oldest, but you were longest supporters.
900 years old. Thank you. I love the program so much. All right, we love you guys. Happy Friday. I'll be back in a little while to do Freedom Fridays, but thanks for coming, my friend. And thank you guys for being vulnerable and supporting the show, and let's all get out there and support Eric.